Hey everyone, my name is Raphael, and we're going to be doing a GitHub Basics tutorial for the Digital Eagles Team 5667. We are going to be creating a GitHub repository. We're going to learn how to stage, commit, and push all of our files and folders that we decide to add to a repository. We'll also learn about commit messages and how to pull, what branches are, etc. For this project or this lesson, you're going to need a GitHub account. There's not really any follow along portions to this lesson. It's just mainly me showing you guys how to do it, but you're more than welcome to create your own repository and mess around with the commands that I show you in this lesson. In order to do that, you're going to need your own GitHub account. You'll also need Git installed, and the way you can make sure you have it installed is by running the Git command, and it should tell you all the different commands that you can run. So yeah, let's get started. We're going to start by making a new repository, and for this tutorial we're going to be using the haunted house. And so whenever you're creating a new repository, you typically want to name it whatever it is you're working on. So for example, if you were doing the season code for 2020, it would be FRC 2020 or something like that. So because this is the haunted house, we're going to do haunted house, and then you typically want to provide the year that you're doing this so that you remember or so you know that what year this was created and what it's referring to. So we're going to be doing this for 2019. The description is optional and you can always add it later, so we're not going to do that. Public, we typically want to make our repositories public so that it's open source and that any other team that's struggling or looking for inspiration or just simply wants to see what we did can take a look at our code. It can be private though. Initialize this repository with a README. We can do this and we will. So we'll create a README, and then for git ignore, what git ignores are is it basically ignores any kind of files that you don't want getting pushed to the repository. This typically includes environment files. And so like for example, if we were working with Node, I'm pretty sure Node, so like Node modules would be excluded, and that's just basically a really big folder with all your dependencies, and you don't want all of that getting pushed. So you can always add these on later on, but we don't really need this right now. For licenses, there's a bunch of open source licenses you can look through and read their terms and whatever, but we're not going to use a license for this. So we're just going to create this repository. Now that we've created it, we can see that there's the README that we created, and you can see this thing right here. So what this is it's telling us the latest commit, which is like the most recent, was done by me, and the message is initial commit. Typically when you're committing for the first time, you typically want to make your commit message an initial commit, and we'll learn more about that later on. But another thing to notice is the branch we're currently on. This is the branch master. Branches are sort of like folders of the version that you're currently working on, and master is like the production folder. For example, it's the main folder. This is where everyone sees, but then again, they can also click on this and see other branches. In the future, when we're going to be having multiple people working on different things, the branches this branch tab right here is going to be filled with a lot of different branches. It's going to be your name and then underscore whatever it is you're working on. And so that's how we'll be able to differentiate who's working on what, who did what, and it'll keep our master branch clean of any bugs and errors. So next what we want to do is go over here, and we're going to want to grab this link right here. This is the link that points to this repository, and we're going to need it in order to make any changes or work on it. So now I'm going to open up the terminal. I already have it open. I'm going to change directories into my dev folder. Okay, now that we're in the dev folder, I'm going to git clone. And now what git clone does is it basically takes this repository right here. I just pasted the link that I described over here, and we're going to pull it down to our machine so that we can work on it. So I'm going to clone it. Now, if I type ls, which is basically just listing all the folders in this folder right here, we can see the haunted house repository right here. So we're going to change directory into that folder and just clear that. We can see that we're on master. My terminal has a really cool feature that basically just shows me the status of any repository in the branch we're currently working on, and it's super useful. Next, what we're going to do is if I ls, we can see this README that it created right here. But we're going to start by making the folders for this haunted house project and all of the different mechanisms that we're going to build. And so if I just quickly go over here, these are all of the folders that we're going to be creating. These are all the mechanisms that are going to be made during the haunted house project. So I'm just going to make each of these a folder. Alright, so now if I list again, we can see all of the folders that I just created. We're going to open up a new window, and we're going to open up this repository that we just made, because if you create empty folders, GitHub is smart in that it notices that these folders are currently empty, and so there's no need for it to currently track those folders. So if we were to try to push this to GitHub, none of this would actually get pushed because it recognizes that these folders are empty and that there's no need to push anything. So if we run a git status really quickly, we can see that we're up to date, there's nothing to commit, it's all clean, but that's not true because we just made folders, but they're empty. So we need to add some readmes to these folders so that GitHub starts tracking it. So we're just going to create readmes for right now, but this will eventually be populated with the code for each mechanism. And as you can see, I just started creating them, and Visual Studio Code is now telling us, look, this file is untracked. So we're tracking that folder now. Alright, so now that we've created all of these files, for those of you that don't know, MD stands for Markdown, and it's basically like a simpler version of HTML, and it just basically lets us create like HTML pages that explain what our projects are. And so let's just change this, for example, Digital Eagles Haunted House 2019. The default is just the repository name, but we can change it and add whatever it is that we want. But now, as we can see, all of these files are now untracked. So GitHub is currently tracking those folders now. So if we do git status again, and I just did up arrow on the keyboard, we can now see that we modified the README, which is this one right here. We changed the title right here, and we have now added these folders. It's now tracked because of these READMEs that we created. And all of these are currently unstaged, right? So they're untracked. So we need to stage them. So the way we do that is by doing git add period. And what period is it's like a greedy quantifier. Think of it as that way. It's just saying grab everything in here and just add it. We could individually add each and every single one, so like error blast, but that just takes a very long time, and it's just simpler to do period. So we're going to do git add period. And now if we run git status again, oops, I misspelled it. Git status, we can now see that these are now tracked, and we want to commit these now. If for some reason we added something that we didn't want to add, we can always run this command, git reset head and then the file name, and that'll just remove it. So for example, if you had like some sort of folder or file that has like your password in it or something and you didn't want that pushed and it was an accident, so you can always remove it like that. But it's always helpful to take a look at what you're adding and make sure that it's all correct. So this looks good to me. We're now going to commit these, and so when we commit, we always have to pass a message, and the way we identify this message is with this dash M right here. So it's a string, which means we need quotation marks. And whenever you're committing a message, so like I said earlier, this message is what we will see right here. And so whenever someone else is working on a project, we can also look at like commit messages. So if we click here, we can see all the commits that were made. And so whenever we're working on a project with multiple programmers, it's always helpful that we leave detailed messages, but we also don't want to make them very long. So for example, if we're working on the elevator code, then you would leave the message as worked on elevator code, or if you change the method, you would say change this method, etc. It all depends on what you're doing. So for right now, we are going to just simply say added project folders, and we're going to commit these by running this command. And now we have committed basically all of these folders. So if we run git status, oh man, I did it again. Okay, we can now see, first of all, we no longer have this helpful tool that tells us that we're good. It says git branch on master. We're ahead by one commit. So it's taking a look at the current commits on the GitHub, and it's looking at ours, and we're ahead, which means that we need to push them so that this folder now gets it, because if we go back to code, we can see that these folders still don't exist here. So we're ahead right now, so we need to push. But other than that, there's nothing to commit, and we're clean, which is why we no longer have the helpful tools that we once had, like this right here. Typically, when you're working on projects with multiple people, you always want to pull at this point right here. So the way you would do that is you would run git pull origin master, and what that basically means is it takes the current version and it pulls it. GitHub will normally tell you if you try to push and there's like someone else, like for example, let's say that you try to push code, but someone pushes code before you. You now have an older version of the repository, and when you try to push that code, it's going to be like, sorry, you can't do that. Someone pushed code and you need the recent version in order to push as well. And so in order to fix this issue, we need to git pull, and you might run into merge conflicts. And if you do, I would always recommend that you use the VS Code terminal. So if you go to VS Code and then you do a terminal, you typically want to type all your GitHub commands in here, because if there is some sort of merge conflict or issue, VS Code has a really nice feature in which everything is visual. So if you have a merge conflict, for example here, there it'll be like, this is the recent version and this is what you have, which one do you want to keep, and then you get to click. If you're doing it on the terminal, you're going to get this really nasty tool called Vim, and you have to learn how to use it, and it's a lot more complicated. So just save yourself the headache and use VS Code whenever you're doing all of this, and use the terminal right here. But we're the only one working on this right now. Well, we can pull, it won't really do anything, but as you can see, we're already up to date. But if there was something, we would see it get pulled, and it would tell us what changed, etc. But now that we're committed, we're going to push our code. And the way that we can do that is by typing in this command, git push origin master. Origin is our local repository. Master is where we want to push, the master branch. Or actually, I have that backwards, I think. Origin is the remote, which is automatically set when we cloned it. So whenever we cloned it and we put that long URL in, that was the origin. We want to push our master branch, which is this right here. So we're going to push. If this is your first time using the terminal, it's going to prompt you for your username and password. And you just type in your username for GitHub and then your password. Whenever you type in your password, you won't see the password actually being typed, and that's just because of like the security feature that they have. So it's completely normal, but other than that, if you mess up like the password, you have to press backspace 20 times until you think you've deleted everything. But as you can see, we're now pushed. So if we go back to Chrome and just refresh, we should be able to now see all the projects that we just created and the new update that we made. And we can also see this commit. So now we have two commits. If we look at commit history, we can see that I did this, committed 4 minutes ago. This is what we did, and we can look specifically at what the project looks like during this commit. And we should be able to also see the changes we made, which in this case was we changed this and we added these folders and files. We can leave comments, etc. But for right now, that's something we want to do. We're just going to go back and everything is nice and set up and ready to go.